The morning mist rolled in from the Atlantic, wrapping the coastline in a dull gray haze. A silver sedan slowed to a stop at the entrance of Naval Base Sentinel Point, headlights cutting through the fog like tired eyes. A woman stepped out, jeans, weathered boots, and a navy hoodie that had seen better days. A single duffel rested on her shoulder, heavy enough to drag one side of her down as she moved. Nothing about her drew attention, and that was exactly the point. The gate guard barely looked up. He scanned her ID, gave the plastic card a bored flick, and handed it back. "Administrative transfer," he muttered. She nodded once. "Welcome to Sentinel Point," he said, waving her through before going back to his coffee. Behind him, two Marines leaned on the concrete barrier, trading jokes about new transfers. "Another one from logistics," one said, smirking. "Hope she can type faster than the last." Their laughter drifted across the cold morning air, swallowed by the hum of floodlights. She didn't react, didn't even look back. Her eyes scanned everything. The guard tower, the perimeter cameras, the spacing between patrols. Every movement was calculated, efficient. No one here knew who she really was. The woman who had just walked through the gate under the name Leah Monroe wasn't some clerk from logistics. She was a Rear Admiral, the youngest in fleet history, and the newly appointed commanding officer of this entire base. But today, no one saluted. No one noticed. She preferred it that way. Inside the base, the world buzzed with quiet chaos. Sailors shouting across the yard, forklifts dragging crates, radios crackling with half-heard chatter. Leah walked the narrow path along the chain-link fence, boots crunching gravel, the smell of salt and oil drifting in from the docks. She passed a small group of junior sailors at a smoking pit. One of them looked up, gave her a quick once-over, then looked away. No uniform, no rank, no reason to care. Good, she thought. That's how I need it. The main administration building stood ahead, gray concrete, streaked from years of sea wind. Inside, the lobby buzzed with phones, printers, and that hollow fluorescent hum found in every base across the world. A tired petty officer sat behind the reception desk, surrounded by paperwork and energy drinks. His name tag read Harris. "Transfer from Norfolk?" he asked, barely glancing up. "Yes," Leah said. "Administrative support, reporting as ordered." He scrolled through a computer screen, yawning. "Room 3A, Lieutenant Colonel Rains. He'll get you settled." Leah thanked him and took the elevator up. As the doors closed, her reflection stared back. A woman in her late 30s. Hair tied back loosely, face calm but distant. The kind of expression only years of command could carve. She'd spent half her life leading men and women into storms. Some literal, some not. She'd seen ships burn under fire, heard the silence that followed names called on the radio that never answered back. The stars on her old uniform had never felt heavy until she stopped wearing them. The elevator opened to a dim hallway lined with outdated posters and half-torn memos. Leah found the door at the end and knocked twice. "Come in," a voice called. Lieutenant Colonel David Rains sat behind a desk that looked like it was losing a war with paperwork. His eyes were red from sleeplessness, his coffee half cold, but his posture was perfect. "You the transfer?" he asked without looking up. "Yes, sir. Leah Monroe, administrative support." He skimmed her file, a stripped-down version of her real orders, all identifying details scrubbed clean before she left D.C. "All right, Monroe," he said. "Welcome to the circus. You'll report to Major Grace Holloway in logistics. She'll keep you busy." "Yes, sir." He gave a half-grunt of approval, then pointed toward the hall. "Down the corridor, room 23. And good luck. That department eats people alive." Leah smiled faintly. "I don't quit easily, sir." That made him look up, just for a second. Something flickered in his eyes. He couldn't place it, but he felt it. Authority restrained behind calm words. Then he looked back down. Dismissed. The logistics office was chaos in motion. Stacks of forms, phones ringing, people talking over one another. It smelled like old coffee and burnt toner. At the center of the storm stood Major Grace Holloway, uniform neat but eyes weary, tablet in one hand, folder in the other. "Ma'am," Leah said softly. "Administrative transfer, reporting to you." Holloway barely paused. "You're the new one? Perfect timing. We're drowning." She gestured toward an empty desk near the window. "That's yours. Log in with the guest account until they process your ID." A sergeant across the room leaned back in his chair. "Hope she types faster than the last one, ma'am. Or at least makes it past day 3. Laughter rippled across the desks. Holloway's glare shut it down fast. "Sergeant Briggs, you want to handle the incoming queue yourself?" He straightened. "No, ma'am." Leah didn't react. The words rolled off her like rain. She'd heard sharper tongues in war rooms. She sat, set her duffel beside the chair, and let her fingers rest on the keyboard. Rows of pending requisitions blinked across the screen. Missing parts, stalled shipments, vehicles waiting on repairs that might never come. Outside, cranes loomed over the harbor. Half the ships looked idle, and the ones that weren't ran on patched parts and prayers. The base wasn't broken. It was tired, and tiredness was more dangerous than failure. Before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Whispered Logs for more cinematic military stories inspired by true acts of courage. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Leah spent her first day quietly. No speeches, no showing off. She listened. She watched. Every frustrated sigh, every sarcastic joke, every missed call told her more about the base than any report could. The people weren't lazy. They were lost, swallowed by a system that rewarded paperwork more than precision. By dusk, she had mapped the cracks in her mind. Logistics in chaos, communication half-functional, motor pool behind schedule. The chain of command had gone numb, and nobody even realized how close that numbness was to collapse. Leah worked late into the night, long after the others left. The glow of the monitor washed her face pale as she combed through months of broken data entries. Somewhere in the silence, she smiled to herself. A small, knowing smile. This was exactly why she'd come. To see the truth up close. To walk among the noise before she tried to lead it. To find what was left worth saving. Outside, the Atlantic wind howled across the base like a distant warning. And inside that small office, the woman everyone dismissed as another transfer quietly began taking command of a place that didn't yet know who she was. The week unfolded like a slow test of patience. Sentinel Point wasn't loud in its dysfunction. It was subtle, like a slow leak in a sealed room. Every process looked fine on paper, but nothing moved. Every morning, Leah walked the corridors with quiet steps, listening more than she spoke. Every office had its own rhythm. The same sighs, the same frustrations, the same quiet belief that this is just how it's always been. By the 5th day, she had seen it all. Requisitions that took months instead of weeks. Equipment marked delivered that never arrived. Reports rewritten to sound better than the reality they described. The base wasn't failing because people didn't care. It was failing because they'd stopped believing it could be fixed. That afternoon, Major Holloway sent Leah to a coordination meeting. "Just to observe," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Take notes. Keep your head down. These meetings are political." The conference room smelled like stale coffee and burnt circuits. Around the table sat a mix of captains, majors, and one grumpy commander. They shuffled papers, half listening to the agenda. Captain Mills, the operations officer, flipped through the sheets with a frown. "Here we go again. New readiness codes, new procedures. Every time they change something up top, we spend a month cleaning the mess." A few officers chuckled in agreement. "Who writes this garbage anyway?" someone asked. "Feels like it's designed by people who've never touched a flight deck." Leah sat at the back, pen poised. The irony stung. She had written the early draft of those very procedures 3 years ago, in a sealed room thousands of miles away. She'd built them to simplify, not complicate. But after committees and revisions, they'd been buried under bureaucracy. She didn't speak. She just took notes. Every complaint was a symptom, every joke a clue. Mills shook his head and said, "Whoever made these policies should have to live under them for a week." Leah's pen paused above the paper. "I did," she thought. "And I'm still here." When the meeting ended, she left as quietly as she'd entered. No one noticed her leave. Just another face in admin gray. At lunch, the mess hall was full, yet no one smiled. Stainless trays clattered under fluorescent lights. Leah moved through the chow line, listening. 2 lieutenants in flight suits sat nearby, bent over a printed schedule. "Have you seen this?" one said, stabbing a finger at the paper. "This new drill cycle's insane. Whoever planned it clearly doesn't understand aircrew rest hours." "Yeah," the other replied. "Probably some desk officer who's never seen a cockpit." Leah's lips twitched, barely a smile. She poured her coffee and moved on. They never looked up. When she sat down alone, she opened her notebook. Inside, her notes weren't about procedures or timelines. They were about people. She mapped them like terrain. Who complained out of apathy, who out of frustration, and who still cared enough to be angry. Every base had fault lines. Sentinel points were starting to show. 2 days later, Holloway handed her a stack of forms. "Take these to the motor pool," she said. "If you can get them signed, you'll be a miracle worker." Leah took them without hesitation. The motor pool smelled of oil, heat, and stale coffee. Rows of vehicles stood in various states of disrepair. A grease-streaked sergeant barked orders across the hangar, clipboard in hand. "Staff Sergeant Cole?" Leah asked. He turned, skeptical. "That's me." "I'm here from logistics," she said, holding the forms. "These requisitions need signatures." He scanned them, scoffing. "These are the same requests I sent up a month ago, still marked in transit. You want me to sign off that we're operational when half this fleet's dead?" Leah's voice stayed calm. "No, Sergeant. I want to know what you need to make them operational again." Cole blinked, thrown off by the question. "What I need? I need leadership to stop pretending paperwork fixes engines." He handed the clipboard back, frustration visible in every motion. "You new here?" "Yes." "Then here's your first lesson," he said. "Around here, truth travels slower than approval." She met his gaze evenly. "Then let's speed it up." For a long second, neither spoke. Then Cole sighed, pulled the forms back, and began scribbling real numbers in the margins. "Fine," he muttered. "You want truth? Here's the mess, line by line." By the time she left, he'd given her more than signatures. He'd given her trust. If you're just joining us, this is Whispered Logs, where true courage meets quiet command. Make sure to subscribe and stay till the end. This story's about to turn. That evening, she found Seaman Turner still at his desk, face pale under the flickering light. He looked up, startled. "Ma'am, sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's fine," she said gently. "You've been here late all week." He rubbed his eyes. "I messed up some data entries in the new system. Every fix I make breaks something else. I've been trying to catch up, but—" "Show me." Together they traced the mess. Mismatched entries, old records colliding with new software. Leah's fingers moved across the keyboard like she'd been here her whole life. After an hour, the worst of it was contained. Turner exhaled. "You didn't have to help. Most people would have told me to start over." Leah smiled faintly. "Everyone's fast when the system makes sense. You were never the problem, sailor. The system was." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded, eyes brighter now. Word began to spread. The new clerk didn't complain. She stayed late. She listened. She knew how to fix problems that had nothing to do with her department. The jokes stopped when she entered a room. People started whispering instead. "Who is she?" She moved like someone who had spent years giving orders but chose not to. She quoted regulation codes without looking them up. She knew which communication arrays were outdated, which generators could be rerouted in an emergency. No one could explain it. One night, Leah lingered in the office long after everyone had gone home. The hum of the air conditioners was the only sound left. As she reached for a pen, her sleeve slid up, just enough to reveal a faded tattoo on her forearm. A trident, small, uncolored, quietly earned. A logistics tech passing by froze mid-step. "Ma'am, where'd you get that?" She glanced down, tugged her sleeve back. "Old mistake," she said lightly. He laughed awkwardly. "You'd have to be deep Navy to have one of those." Leah smiled. "Something like that." He left, puzzled. Later, in the break room, two sailors debated which Japanese port had the best ramen. When they asked her, half-jokingly, she answered in flawless Japanese. Both men blinked. "You were stationed in Yokosuka?" Leah stirred her coffee. "Once upon a time." Then she left them staring after her in silence. The storm rolled in 3 nights later, dark clouds pressing low over the bay, rain sweeping sideways across the tarmac. The weather team called it a routine coastal system. But anyone who'd lived long enough near the Atlantic knew the look of trouble. Inside the logistics office, the windows rattled under the wind. Holloway rubbed her temples, staring at the storm radar on her screen. "We've got a supply aircraft inbound tonight," she said. "Critical parts, communication gear, the works. If this weather holds, it'll be fine. If not, we lose another week," Leah said quietly. "At best," Holloway sighed. "Command already thinks we're falling apart. Another missed delivery and they'll send auditors instead of aid." Leah said nothing. She just looked out the window, watching the sea vanish into mist. The first sign of trouble came as a low electronic tone, One long descending beep that cut through the background chatter. Then another. Someone called out from the hallway. "Communications just dropped primary link to the tower." Holloway's phone rang. "What do you mean dropped?" she snapped. "We've got an aircraft inbound." Leah was already on her feet. The power flickered once, twice, then steadied under the dull red glow of backup lights. The rain outside turned horizontal. Inside the communications hub, chaos ruled. Screens glowed with red warnings. Systems frozen mid-update. Sergeant Pike, the comms lead, barked orders into a failing headset. "I don't care what the software says. The tower's deaf. We've lost stable contact with the aircraft." Leah scanned the room, saw the problem immediately. Power surge, damaged relay, backup antenna overloaded. Pike slammed down the handset. If they can't hold comms, they'll divert. But with this storm... "They won't make it far," Leah finished softly. The officer on duty looked frozen, flipping through a manual that might as well have been written in another language. Leah's voice broke the noise like a blade through fog. "Shift tower traffic to frequency 325. Pike, check the backup antenna chain manually. I want eyes on every relay from here to the tower input." Heads turned. Pike blinked. "Ma'am, we can't just—" "You can," she said calmly. 325 is clear of interference and still within aircraft presets. Move." Something in her tone made him obey without question. Within moments, the room transformed. Orders shouted, connections rerouted, people working instead of panicking. Leah moved between them with steady precision, her voice level even as thunder cracked overhead. On the main screen, the aircraft signal flickered, then steadied. "Sentinel Tower, this is cargo flight," came a distorted voice. "Fuel margins low, visibility critical. Request priority guidance." Leah grabbed the headset. "This is Sentinel Point," she said, her tone even. "Switch to approach frequency 325. Confirm once established." Static. Then, copy, switching. The next voice came through, clearer, stronger. "Sentinel, this is cargo flight on 325, reading you 5x5. Leah nodded once. "Maintain current heading. Tower is vectoring you through the calm corridor of the cell. You're clear to land." Holloway stared at her, speechless. The rest of the room went silent except for the steady hum of restored systems. 15 minutes later, the aircraft touched down safely on the drenched runway. No one cheered. They just breathed. Leah removed the headset, handed it back to the officer on duty, and said quietly, "Good work. Log everything accurately. Don't clean it up for command. They need to know how close we came." Then she turned to Holloway, whose eyes were wide with realization. "Monroe," she said softly, "where did you learn to do that?" Leah looked toward the rain-soaked window. "Same place you learn anything worth knowing," she said. "At sea." Dawn came gray and quiet, washing the base in a thin veil of sea mist. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that mirrored the first hints of sunrise. For most of Sentinel Point, the night's chaos was already a story spreading through hallways. The night a supply aircraft nearly vanished in the storm, until an admin transfer saved the day. By breakfast, the rumors had names, guesses, and exaggerations. Some said the woman in logistics had called the landing frequencies before the tower could. Others swore she'd been a combat air traffic controller in another life. No one agreed on the details, only that something about her didn't add up. Leah arrived at her desk exactly on time. She wore the same faded hoodie, the same calm expression. The others stole glances at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Major Holloway emerged from her office holding 2 cups of coffee. She set one beside Leah without a word. Their eyes met briefly. Gratitude passed between them, quiet and unspoken. "Command wants a report," Holloway said. "They're coming down from Washington this morning. Some admiral taking over the post." Leah's expression didn't change. "They're coming today?" 900 sharp. "Whole base will be in formation. Guess they want to show we can still follow orders." Holloway sighed. "You should come. It'll be something to see." "I wouldn't miss it," Leah said. The parade field shimmered with fresh rain when the morning bugle called. Hundreds of uniforms formed precise rows, boots aligned along the painted white lines. The air smelled of salt, fuel, and damp asphalt. Across the bay, sunlight struck the hulls of anchored ships, turning them to silver ghosts. Major Holloway stood near the front with Lieutenant Colonel Raines and the senior staff. Farther back, Sergeant Cole and his motor pool team fidgeted with their caps, still whispering about the mystery woman from logistics. Sergeant Pike stood beside the communications crew, eyes fixed on the reviewing stand. At the edge of the field, the master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone. "Attention on deck!" Every line stiffened. Flags snapped in the wind. The brass band lifted their instruments. "Prepare for the arrival of the incoming commanding officer," the announcer declared. From the far side of the field, footsteps echoed, the sound of leather soles on wet pavement, and then she appeared. Leah Monroe stepped into the sunlight, wearing full dress whites. The uniform fit like armor forged by time itself. Ribbons aligned with mathematical precision, shoes polished to mirror brightness, admiral stars gleaming on each shoulder. For a long, suspended second, no one moved. The laughter, the rumors, the dismissive jokes, they all collapsed into silence. Holloway's hand went slack around her coffee cup. "Oh my God," she whispered. Across the motor pool ranks, Cole froze mid-salute, wrench oil still under his fingernails. The young gate guard who'd once waved her through felt his stomach drop as realization struck. The announcer's voice cracked once before steadying. "Ladies and gentlemen, Rear Admiral Leah Monroe, assuming command of Naval Base Sentinel Point." The band struck a note, the anthem rising like a tide. But the crowd wasn't listening. Every pair of eyes was locked on her. Leah climbed the steps to the podium, sunlight flashing across her medals. She stopped beside the outgoing commander, saluted once, then turned to face the rows of stunned faces. The silence was heavy enough to feel. When she spoke, her voice carried clear and calm across the entire field. "I spent my first week here as a transfer clerk," she began. "No rank, no uniform, just another name on paper." A murmur rippled through the ranks. She continued, unhurried. "I wanted to see this base as it truly was, through your eyes. Not the version written in reports or polished for inspections, but the one that breathes in the hallways after midnight." She paused, letting the words settle. "I saw frustration. I saw systems that made good people look like failures. I saw equipment waiting for signatures that never came. But I also saw something else." She leaned slightly forward. "I saw people who still cared, people who fixed what they could even when no one thanked them." Every head lifted a little higher. The wind rattled the flagpoles. The sound filled the gaps between her sentences. "Major Holloway," Leah said, turning her gaze toward the front line. "Step forward." Holloway hesitated only a heartbeat before marching up, her boots striking sharp against the asphalt. She saluted, jaw tight. "This officer held the line when the system broke," Leah said. "She never stopped fighting for her people, even when it cost her sleep and peace of mind. From this day, she will lead our logistics reform task force." Applause began hesitantly, then grew until it rolled like surf across the formation. Holloway blinked hard, swallowed, and returned to her place. "Staff Sergeant Riley Cole," Leah called. The sergeant looked stunned. Someone nudged him forward. He hurried up, wiping his hands on his uniform. "When the storm hit," she said, "this man didn't wait for orders. He acted. He reminded every one of us that real readiness begins with responsibility." Cole's salute trembled slightly. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice rough. "Sergeant First Class Daniel Pike," Leah continued. Front and center. Pike strode up quickly, trying not to smile. "This NCO kept the lines alive when our systems failed. His leadership saved more than a supply flight. It saved our credibility as a command. Sergeant Pike will head the new Technical Integrity Division." He saluted crisply. "Honored, ma'am." Leah returned the salute, then faced the formation once more. "These three didn't wait for permission to do the right thing," she said. "They acted, they cared, and that's what I expect from everyone on this base, starting today." She let the silence linger, the sea wind tugging at the edges of her uniform. "From this day on," she said softly, "we fix problems before they become excuses." The words echoed across the field, clear as bells. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lieutenant Colonel Rains, the man who had once barely looked up from her transfer orders, stepped forward and raised his hand in a salute that cut the air like a blade. Leah returned it, meeting his eyes with quiet understanding. The rest followed, one by one at first, then all at once. Hundreds of salutes rose in perfect unison. The sound of boots striking the ground rolled through the base like distant thunder. The brass band shifted into the Navy hymn, the melody carried by the wind. Leah stood tall, scanning the faces before her. The guard from the gate, the clerk who had once mocked her typing speed, the pilots who'd cursed the readiness schedule she'd written. Every one of them now stood straight, eyes forward, united not by fear but by recognition. She raised her hand again, slow and deliberate, returning every salute within sight. You're watching Whispered Logs, where every salute has a story. If this moment moved you, remember to subscribe, and tell us in the comments the leader you'll never forget. When the hymn faded, the master of ceremonies dismissed the ranks. The sound of dispersing boots filled the air, but no one spoke. People turned toward each other, half smiling, half shaken. She was here all week, someone whispered. She's the new admiral? Another murmured. No, a voice answered softly. She's our admiral. Holloway approached the podium, still processing the reveal. Ma'am, all this time? Leah smiled faintly. All this time. You could have walked in wearing stars on day one. I needed to see who was fighting for this place, Leah replied. Stars can't show you that. They stood for a moment in shared silence, watching the flag twist in the wind. Down by the motor pool fence, Cole was still standing at attention. A grin breaking through the disbelief. Pike clapped him on the shoulder. Told you she wasn't a regular clerk, he said. Cole laughed, shaking his head. Guess we're all working for the storm now. The phrase spread faster than any rumor. Working for the storm. It wasn't meant as fear. It was respect. That afternoon, Leah walked the base alone. Everywhere she went, people straightened as she passed. Salutes were crisp now, not out of obligation but pride. At the communications hub, Pike's crew stood lined up along the corridor, tools in hand, waiting for inspection. The equipment racks gleamed, every connection rechecked. Looks good, she said. Won't look almost good again, Pike replied. Leah smiled. Hold yourself to that. At the motor pool, Cole met her by the open bay doors. Fresh rain dripped from the eaves. Vehicles stood in neat rows, each tagged and fueled. You got what you needed? She asked. He nodded. Every part, every form. The system listens now. Good, she said. Make sure it keeps listening. In logistics, Holloway was already rebuilding the process flow. Charts covered the walls, color-coded routes for supplies, simplified requisition trees. This will take months, Holloway warned. Then we start today, Leah said. No one else will fix it for us. That night, Leah sat alone in her office overlooking the harbor. The storm's remnants rolled gently across the water, moonlight breaking between clouds. On her desk lay a small wooden box. Inside, metals she rarely wore. She traced the edge of one with her thumb, remembering the noise of engines, the smell of diesel and salt, the distant faces she'd carried with her since command first found her. A soft knock came at the door. It was Holloway, holding a folder. Tomorrow's schedule, ma'am. Leah nodded. Thank you, Grace. Holloway hesitated at the doorway. Can I ask something? Why Sentinel Point? You could have taken any post. Leah looked out at the sea, the waves catching the light like moving glass. Because this place forgot how to believe in itself, and I remember what that feels like. Holloway smiled faintly. Then they picked the right storm. Leah returned the smile. Let's hope so. When Holloway left, the room fell quiet again. Leah closed the metal box, placed it aside, and looked back toward the window. Out on the pier, floodlights shone on ships ready for deployment. For the first time in years, the base didn't look tired. It looked alive. She whispered to herself, not as an order, but as a promise. Tomorrow, we start over. The tide shifted, the night settled, and the woman once mistaken for a clerk now commanded every heartbeat of Sentinel Point, not through rank, but through truth. 6 months later, Sentinel Point looked like a different world. The same gray buildings stood in the same places, but everything between them felt sharper, alive. Forklifts hummed with purpose in the supply yards. Crates that once collected dust were now labeled, logged, and moving. Every requisition was traceable to a name. Every report double-checked, not because someone demanded it, but because everyone cared to make it right. The change hadn't come from orders or threats. It had come from pride, the quiet kind that grows only when people start believing again. Rear Admiral Leah Monroe walked the length of the main corridor just after dawn, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing softly around her. Every salute she passed now was crisp and real, not because of the stars on her shoulders, but because of the memory of the week she had worn none. She paused by a wall once covered in faded posters. In their place hung new ones, blueprints of updated systems, signed work plans, photographs of crews smiling beside rebuilt vehicles and upgraded consoles.